Morning glory and evening grace, America. I'm Hugh. It's been 7 days since Charlie Kirk was assassinated. We would be concluding sitting Shiva if we were Jewish, but it is appropriate, nevertheless, to dedicate the full 7 days. Charlie's funeral will be this weekend. Talk about Charlie and about the looming Schumer shutdown. I'm joined by Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma, uniquely qualified for this because he was a minister of gospel and word before he got into politics. Charlie was a guy in politics before he began an evangelist. James Lankford, welcome, Senator. Your thoughts a week after the murder of Charlie?
Yeah, Hugh, it's good to see you again. And it is exceptionally difficult still to be able to process through for the nation. I tell you that for you and I that have lived a little bit longer on it, we've seen painful moments before for many of our folks that are both staff and people that I'm around that are college students or in their young 20s. They're experiencing a national trauma like they have personally not experienced before in a new way on this for someone they knew and respected. They'd watched him grow in his faith. They had watched him get married and have children, and it's like they've lived life with him for the past decade. And then suddenly, for him to be assassinated is trauma like they've literally personally never experienced for someone they had great respect for. So, you said it well. He's a guy that started out in politics, and the longer he went, the more he realized the issues in our nation are more spiritual than they are anything else. And he spoke so often about spiritual things and challenged people to not only live faith, investigate faith, to be able to take a second look at it, but then to be able to live the values that we hold so dear.
I want to remind the audience, Senator, you spent decades as a pastor of youth peep, doing it in Oklahoma at one of the largest summer camps for kids. What would you do when kids hit trauma? Because it's a collective trauma for kids that is unlike any I've actually seen, because I went around for JFK and I barely remember RFK. I don't know what one does to a cohort like this, and I suppose you've done it on an individual basis.
I have actually spent time with lots of different families over the years, and it's quite frankly just being there, allowing people to be able to process, allowing people to be able to talk about it, praying with them, reassuring them again that God is still God. He's not stopped being God, and that these incredibly painful, difficult days, painfully so, will not be the last. But we've also seen a lot of good days, and we wrap around families and encourage them. That's just the reality of humanity and quite frankly, sinful human nature. If you want to go all the way back to Cain and Abel, this is not new. To be able to see people get out of control, anger, rage, and to be able to take it out in violence on another person. But it is the reason that personally I'm a Christ follower, and I continue to be able to encourage people in their faith, because it does challenge us to be able to live better, do better, speak better, and to be able to challenge others to be able to do the same in a world that has freedom of choice, but we so often choose what's wrong.
Now, Senator, I've got a column in the Washington Examiner today suggesting maybe a Kirk commission would be in order, not a murder inquest. We know who did the murder, and we'll find out if anyone helped him, but really to process what's going on the web with young people, because this is something you didn't have to counsel on. You know, pornography is forever, but that's not pornography. We're not talking about that. We're talking about diseased minds gathering in communities that really don't benefit anyone except the diseased, and it advances the disease. Any ideas?
Yeah, the only thing worse than where we are right now on social media is government trying to control all manage of social media, because I don't want government to be in control of free speech and government to be in control of what's appropriate, not appropriate. But saying that, we do have an awful lot of folks that are running down the rabbit hole, and social media sees it, knows about it, and facilitates a deeper dive into these crazy rabbit hole, anger, violent places on the web. And that becomes promoted. If you ever look at it once, you're going to get it twice. If you look at it twice, you're going to get it 10 more times, 20 more times, and then eventually it does become your reality. I would assume some smart journalist at some point is going to ask some hard questions and say, how did this kid who grew up in a conservative family leave and go to Utah State, drop out, head into this dark abyss of all the places that he ended up with on the web, and end up with a transgender roommate and a whole different lifestyle and relationships? What happened in that short 4 or 5 year period to be able to make that change? And how did it go this deep into a very far place from how he actually grew up as well? So I assume those questions are going to be asked. They should come out, and they should lead to a broader national conversation about what does this mean, and how do we hold social media accountable for places that they push people and hold people just for the sake of their advertisers.
Yeah, and it is a First Amendment protected space. Justice Barrett and I
It
talked
is.
about that on Monday of this week. It's not a place for legislation. It is a place for study along the line of Jonathan Haidt and others about how to guide children away from it, warn them about it. I mean, for goodness sake, cigarette packs come with warnings on them. One would think that the internet would as well.
Hugh, I
Senator,
would tell
while
you,
I have you, go ahead.
that's right. In Oklahoma, all of our schools ban cell phones during the day. We have bell to bell, no cell, and it's the first year we've had that. It's now been there for a month, and every parent, teacher, and student that I've talked to has all said this has been remarkable. The difference on campus this year versus last year, when kids aren't being fed all this stuff all day long, they're actually head up, conversation, different attitude, different things that are going on in the lunchroom. Said it's just been remarkable the change just by not having a cell phone in front of them all day in school. So there is something to be learned by saying, how do we give more space, especially for vulnerable young people?
And then after school, there are things that parents need to learn as well.
Yeah.
Bell to bell, no cell is a great place to start. Senator, you're deeply involved in negotiations with Senator Schumer, or I should say frustrations with Senator Schumer. Appears that we've got a Schumer shutdown coming. Anything to avert this train wreck? He wants to close the government. I don't know why. Why does he want to close the government?
Well, because earlier this year he voted for a CR and the left just attacked him relentlessly and said you should never do anything to help Trump shut the government down, close it down. He took so much heat for that that he's now trying to be able to stand up and say, I'm going to close the government down. And his determination is if Republicans don't give us $300 billion to keep the government open another 7 weeks, we're not going to sign off on this. And the $300 billion is premium subsidies that were done during COVID that Democrats did when they had the Democrat House, Senate, and White House. They added additional money for healthcare subsidies during COVID. They're now saying, yes, COVID's long over, but we want those same subsidies out there, and we want an additional $300 billion to be able to cover that, or we'll shut the government down. Even though this continuing resolution is just keep the current spending we're at, keep it there for 7 weeks while we continue to negotiate the 12 bills and to be able to get them done. It's just not rational. So we're continuing to say, hey, we want to be able to keep the government open. I personally think government shutdowns are a bad idea. I've got legislation to prevent government shutdowns from ever happening again, just basically keeping us in continuous session, focus on appropriations if we ever have a moment like this again, but we don't have a shutdown in the process because it wastes taxpayer dollars. But this is a moment where Senator Schumer has determined I've got to show my far left progressives that I'm fighting Trump. And he's talking about shutting down the government if he doesn't get $300 billion, which is irrational.
You know, if reforms are needed on Obamacare, and they are, can't they be done in the regular legislative order during the appropriations process and actually sit down and have a conversation about how to fix the nightmare that is Obamacare rather than throwing money at the problem?
You bet it can. What he's looking for is no reforms, no changes, just more money. We have a situation now where we've got folks that are in poverty. The way they did this in 2021, when it was Democrats had all parts, they added a new piece saying those that are 150% of poverty or less pay zero premium. Which now what's happened is some of these navigators and entities are actually signing up people because they get a commission for every sign up, and people don't even know they're being signed up. They're being changed around from plan to plan because the new commission is done every time they change plans, and they're allowed to change every single month. So this has been a huge win for all of those different brokers that are out there in the commissions. But we're now paying literally billions of dollars to people to get insurance that literally don't even know they have insurance coverage at all. So it is a huge fraud problem that's sitting out there. We're glad to be able to talk about what are we going to do on folks that are in poverty, just like we did with Medicaid. How do we encourage work incentives? How do we help people in that bracket to be able to make sure they're rising out of poverty and get health care? But we're not interested in facilitating fraud and just throwing money at something that we all know has major problems.
Well, if the leader does not, Democratic leader Schumer does not move, the government will shutter except for essential employees. We'll do that better than Democrats do that. How long will that last? We have a minute, Senator.
You never know. It's kind of like starting a war. It's easier to start a war than it is to stop a war. You never know once a government shutdown starts how long it lasts. The last time Schumer actually did a shutdown was during President Trump's first term, and he wanted to get DACA all legalized and demanded that it was closed over a weekend. He cracked and it reopened.
So I can only hope for that. Senator, safe travels if you are among the delegation heading to Charlie's funeral. I'm amazed by how many members of Senate and House knew Charlie, and